And in order to suss out where we belong, we need to be first seen and heard for who we are, have the other person listen, what we would call fierce vulnerability and openness in the workforce, to be able to be seen and heard and to be able to see and hold and be in a space with somebody else who is a coworker. I think it's a really powerful thing in the workforce, and I think we're all driving towards more and more of that kind of thing. We see it happening with some of the most effective cultures around the world.
Welcome to the Relatable Leader podcast.
This is your behind-the-scenes access to coaching that supports your leadership. And now, here's your host, certified trainer and professional coach, catherinegoggia.
Hello, leaders. Thanks so much for taking time to subscribe and listen to the Relatable Leader podcast. Very excited to share this episode with you. Joining me on a call from San Diego is Mr. Steven Morris. Yes, you can look him up on YouTube. Search for his TedX talk, The Beautiful Business. This guy knows what he's talking about. He has worked with companies like Samsung, Sony, LG, ESPN, yes, even the NFL and the MLB franchises. During the course of this episode, he will invite you to visit his website. So I'll have that link in the show notes. He will also offer up to you free resources through that website. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. We're going to get into the interview here pretty soon. First, let me cover for you what's coming up in Webinar Wednesdays for the remainder of this month. This episode will air on Feb 14, 2019, so you can consider this my Valentine's Day gift for you. Hello, people. Happy love, 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 love out there. Love it. Okay, we have one more Webinar Wednesday topic this month. That's on the 27th. I'm facilitating leading the 4 stages of team development. I want to encourage you to join me for that. It's from 9 to 11, again on Wednesday the 27th. 9 to 11 Pacific Standard Time. How do you reserve your seat? Just jump on over to my website, relatableleader.com. At the top of the homepage, you'll see the pages there, one of which is for my series, Webinar Wednesdays. And from there, you can get the registration links. You'll notice that I'm booked out on webinars for the next several months, and those topics are up there for you. So please do enroll in any that look interesting for you. And then coming up in March, I've got several webinars too, and I'll cover those in our next episode. If you are working here locally in Northern California, in Butte County and the surrounding area, I would love to have you join me for an upcoming live workshop. It is on Thursday, Feb 28th. High Impact Feedback and Listening. That's High Impact Feedback and Listening. It runs from 8:30 until 12:30. I've designed this specifically for supervisors and managers. My live workshops are held here in Chico at the Butte College Skyway Center. And I'm going to give you a little bit of heads up. Our group right now is also running the hazmat cleanup training for people to get up there and help clean up the campfire. And want you to know, if I don't normally get into unemployment here, but if you know anybody who doesn't have a job and they're looking for skills that they can take anywhere, you might want to encourage them to call over to the training place and get signed up for the next group of hazmat training. That's the HazWhopper program. Now, let's get back to my workshop here for a little bit. That program is huge, and those participants pretty much take up our entire parking lot. So if you are coming to any of my live workshops, I encourage you just to park over at Lowe's, which they've given us permission to do. Instead of circling that small parking lot that we have there, park over at Lowe's, get yourself a little walk-in before the training, and I hope to see you on that Thursday. Thanks. Steven Morris, go ahead and say hello to the Relatable Leader audience and tell us about your work as a leader.
Well, thank you, Catherine. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be in front of your audience. And it's always an honor to get to talk about what I do. My day job, if you will, is running what I call a brand evolution consultancy called Mth Degree. And Mth Degree is based on the mathematical terms, meaning without limits. And really the way I think about Mth Degree is marketing without limits. And any organization, as Peter Drucker once said way back in the 1960s, every organization on the planet really has two key principles within it, one of which is innovation, and the innovation is the products and services that we create and we deliver that hopefully create some value out into the world. And the other of which is marketing, and he essentially termed marketing as the way in which we tell the stories that we connect with other people. Sometimes those other people are in the culture or inside the team, but often those other people are on the outside of the world, and we call that marketing. So that's really what I do, and so I work with leaders across the country mostly, but a couple of global clients, and I work with the leadership team to help them evolve their brand, usually first and foremost, and then their culture, which anybody within the organization is a representative of the brand, so the culture has got to be connected to the brand. And then ultimately, because of the work that I do, based on the beliefs of an organization, it has to do with the business and evolving that business.
With your focus on evolving one's brand, certainly for the supervisors and managers that are in our audience today, that's going to relate because most of them are working for other people, other organizations, and they're helping them evolve their brand. But one of the things when I'm coaching supervisors and managers, I like to talk with them about is that they're developing their own brand as a leader, as an employee within that organization. And it's a concept that I find not a lot of them have thought about before. So I wondered if you might talk a little bit about the difference between a person's job and their role, and how that might speak to them developing their own personal brand within their organization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, and thank you for that. I love the work that you're doing and helping people to identify what their brand is, and that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And it could potentially confuse some people, but it could also really invigorate a lot of energy. So when I think about the individual within any organization, be it a small or large organization, I think that we all have our own unique personal talents, gifts, or what we would call genius. And these are the things that we're particularly well wired for, and that when we're put into those situations where we can really thrive. And it's true in our personal lives, and it's true in our work. And when I think about how the two dovetail into personal branding, the more someone understands what their skill set is or what their own personal genius is, the more they're going to identify the right roles for them to be within. And so sometimes when I'm talking with groups and organizations, and even in some of the consultancy work that I do, I talk about the difference between a job and a role. And so the way I think about that is that a role might be that someone is in the HR department and they have a particular function within that, or they're in the marketing department and their role is to orchestrate and deliver on the marketing. And so in any organization, there's a whole bunch of different roles that kind of pop up and that have to do with what the individual is both skilled at, trained at, and has the appetite to deliver on. And that's an individual role. So again, that could be accounting or finance or marketing or even production or anything within the organization.
Right.
But the job for everyone within the company is to help the organization thrive. And so if you think about it I wrote an article a couple of years ago on I'm a beekeeper, and the article was essentially how we as leaders can learn how to be better leaders and how to run better organizations the way that bees run a hive. And the way I talked about it was there's different, within a hive, there's different roles for each one of the bees, but ultimately when someone comes in and attacks that hive, or like me, the beekeeper, who comes in to check the hive to make sure it's safe and say it's time to harvest honey, all the bees then come out and protect the hive. And so this is where we pull together and we help the organization, or in this particular case, the hive, thrive.
Well, I absolutely love that. And one of the reasons that I enjoy interviewing people is that it's so fun to get to know what people are into, and when they're not doing whatever it is their main professional gig is. And what fun to think of you out there in your beekeeper getup. And just on a personal note, I love honeybees, and I'm so glad you're out there trying to help them thrive too, by the way. That's so great, yes. So in your consulting firm, I hear that you're helping businesses not just survive, but thrive. Do you have a mission beyond that might be published? And how long have you been doing that work, Stephen?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the length of time and a little bit about the sort of the history of Mth Degree. So I founded the company in 1994. So this is actually, it sort of took place when I moved from Washington, D.C. up to San Diego. And long story short, what I thought I would do is get a job when I moved out here, because I was working for some very well-known agencies on the East Coast, and then really wanted a lifestyle change. So my wife and I were 1 year married, and we spent literally our first anniversary in a Ryder truck driving cross-country to a city where we knew no one. And like I said, I thought I would come out here and get a job, and the reality was that most of the companies that were here in town weren't doing the quality of work that I was used to doing at this point, or at that point, but because of the East Coast relationships that I had.
Right.
And so I founded my own company, and it started as essentially as a design shop, and then grew into a brand strategy shop, and then again grew into a brand strategy that meets really kind of the marketing mechanisms behind the work. And so about 2 years ago, I sold the marketing side to that business so that I could focus on really what I love, which is the brand strategy side of things. The brand strategy work is really getting in deep and helping organizations realize their own potential. So really my driving purpose within my work is to help organizations rise to their own potential through brand culture and business evolution.
What a great adventure to start a marriage off on, and fun to hear how you were evolving your own business in that way as well. In your observation, Stephen, what do you see as some of the biggest blockers that organizations experience in terms of evolving to their highest potential? What gets in the way, do you think?
That's such a great question. There's probably a solid half a dozen things that tend to get in the way. Sometimes market forces that have nothing to do with or are outside of the control of the organization tends to happen. So, for instance, a new competitor comes into the space, or a new innovation happens within a market area. And sometimes companies are a little bit slow to notice that they have to evolve and respond to those things.
If they're not focused on evolving their brand, as you say, and getting into their highest potential, to me, it just really opens up the door for the competition to start taking some of that market share.
Yeah, it's really hard for organizations to lift their head from what they're currently working on and look out over the horizon and understand that the landscape may have changed while they've been busy doing their work. And rightfully so. I mean, they're busy doing their work. So I do think I'm a huge advocate for being sort of the flame and not the moth, so to speak. And what I mean by that, metaphorically, is that when a business has a strong sense of their own purpose, a strong sense of their own brand, and they then, when they have that sort of fire within their belly, they tend to attract the right people. And those people would be potentially employees who are also called to the core values of the mission of the organization, but also the customers who believe in some of the similar things that they believe. And I think the other bigger obstacle, or the more common obstacle, one of the most common obstacles that I see happen within the organizational life is when it comes time to do the evolution. Organizations understand that they have to significantly evolve, but they also have to balance that with doing the day in and day work that they're currently working on.
Right.
So it's not like, organizations can simply shut down to do a brand or a business evolution. They have to sort of, and if you'll forgive the metaphor, double dutch.
Yep.
So if those of us who understand the jump rope world,
yes.
Double dutch is when two people are holding two different ropes and they're spinning, and you have to jump in while the ropes are already spinning in midair. You just have to time that properly. And so a lot of the work that I do in helping organizations do their own evolution or take them through a process of evolving is to be conscious of what they're currently working on. So it is not so disruptive that it doesn't inhibit their ability to deliver on what they're delivering on today,
right,
while still evolving the organization. And it just tends to end up taking a little bit longer, but the results are exponential.
Yes, I find when we take our time for good work, it seems to pay off most of the time, doesn't it?
It sure does. It's like when if your roof is leaking, it's one thing to just patch that hole. It's another thing to put a whole new roof on.
There you go.
No matter how bad the rain comes,
yes,
it'll sustain it.
Yeah, so true. I want to, as we get to know more about you, Stephen, through this interview, my closing statement for my audience is to lead by example. And in the supervisor workshops, that's also how I close those workshops. You may experience the same thing, that when people are with me in a room, everything makes sense. But when you get back to work and everything's, starts coming at you, sometimes it's hard to remember everything that you learned and apply that as you try to lead by example. And I'm a very big proponent of consistency and the freedom that consistency can actually bring to a person. So I was wondering if you might be able to give us an example of one of the primary ways you demonstrate that same motto, lead by example.
Yeah, well, it's so beautifully said, Catherine, that, a lot of, this is why people roll their eyes when sometimes when they're like, oh, another workshop, do we have to do another workshop?
Right.
But and sometimes what they're saying in that is that the workshop within the workshop is done within the workshop, but then what happens after the workshop?
There you go.
How do you instill what we've worked on, ideally, or learned, and turn that into applied wisdom into the workforce? So I love this lead by example mindset. So I have a couple of different ways that I could probably talk about that. Let me talk about it first and foremost, because I think what you were just talking about is really powerful. We could ask ourselves the question, where does confidence come from? And one of the ways to think about confidence is that it could be, and this is based on what you just said, it could be based on deeply held beliefs. So if we believe, for instance, that leading by example is a great way to go about doing the work that we do, then we instill that within our belief system, and we can confidently then move forward into our work.
Exactly.
And when I think about and apply that particular thinking into the work that I do of brand evolution, it speaks to the leadership beliefs, because the first thing that we work on within these programs is, what does the organization believe? And so one of the things within that is we talk about core values. Core values are the operating system, or at least I define it as the operating system to a culture or an organization. But core values are only as good as how the organization lives them. And in particular, I like helping organizations mine stories that bring those core values to life. And can identify, amplify, and exemplify what those core values are through the sharing and evangelizing stories. So when I think about how people lead by example, I do believe it's walking your talk and first understanding and then tethering in your most deeply held beliefs to your action system that then ultimately becomes systemized and consistent throughout the culture.
I'm so excited to hear your take on this. Where you're going, I think, in my work is like the next level of stories historically that demonstrate those values and puts a history and a power behind them. I absolutely love that. A fairly short story, obviously, because I'm kind of springing this on you right now. But is there a particular story that represents a core value that really hit home with you or had an impact on you?
Wow, yeah, I probably have a couple dozen of them, but let me talk through quickly one of them. So one of the organizations that I work with is a company called H.G. Benton, and they're in the real estate industry. And they have what I would consider a very organic culture within what they do. They have they tap into the personal, the individual genius of the people that work within these organizations. And they have a very simple set of core values, and that core values have to do with service, innovation, and quality. And although they don't say them in that order, I think they say service, quality, and then innovation, and there's a particular purpose behind that. So one of the stories that they were telling me as I was doing core value work with them was this thing called a fire story. And it's interesting when we think about stories, we as human beings, we really don't have any defenses for stories. Stories are some of the things that are told, for centuries and centuries. And it's how knowledge used to be passed down from one generation to the next.
Right.
And not just knowledge, but wisdom. And really, we haven't gotten away from that. The reason that people like the movies, the reason that people like TV shows, and even certain fiction books is because we're a storytelling culture.
Yes.
And so this particular organization, Benton, was sharing with me about how their core values come to life through this one, what they called this fire story. And so what happened is in one of their commercial tenant buildings, a fire took place, and they had a whole story of what they did. They as the people within Benton did to take care of the people within that were affected by the fire within this particular building. How they either found them a new place to occupy their office, how they helped them salvage certain computers or things within their office space, or help protect their manufacturing capability during the fire. Just all kinds of stuff that came about that. And the interesting thing about that is that it's the story of the core values coming to life through the lens of something that went really wrong.
Right.
It wasn't anyone's fault. It was one of those accidental fires. But I think, our character shows up when we're in crisis. And, these stories of core values also show up when we're really pressed to the edge of our character.
Your story sure hits home with me here in Northern California, where two of the companies that I work with had so many employees who lost their homes to the campfire that they went out and rented RVs for those employees. And in one case, they housed and continue to house some of those employees in the parking lot at their facility. And in the other case, they actually decided to take some of the commercial land they owned and turned it into a little miniature RV park for their employees. Do you see that as something that could potentially evolve into the type of story that you're talking about?
Absolutely. It already is. The fact that you told that story, the fact that you know that story, it's one of those stories that I would encourage that culture to capture and tell over and over again. It's so interesting. And you said it earlier, core values are some of the things you see, hanging in a conference wall or, as you walk the halls of an office. And I think those things can be really potent and powerful to remind us of what is it that we believe, and what here makes us unique as a culture. But I do believe it's stories that prove the actionable evidence of how these things are actually coming to life within a particular organization. And every organization has them. They just haven't slowed down often enough. They haven't slowed down to really ask themselves, well, what are the stories that we most value here? And what are the values within those stories that we want to amplify and see in our behavior system over and over again? It makes us consistent and consistently powerful in the way we operate.
Well, I'm right there with you. You know, every now and again, one of the challenges I experience with leaders is them being humble, and admirably humble, I might say, but so humble that they might not want to tell these stories. Because, do you know what I mean? Because they fear sort of putting too much highlight on themselves or becoming sort of braggy. What would you say to that type of leader? That's like, it's a quality to be humble, but not so humble that we don't want to tell our story.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I literally laughed out loud when you said that, because I was on the phone with a new client of mine last week who is facing that, almost the way you described it, exactly that dilemma. This particular leader is very humble, and the way that she was talking about her background and experience, she was like, wow, I don't want to come across sounding, really braggy, and yet, I've done all these things over my career. How do I talk about that in a way that really puts the best life forward in terms of my business and how people are going to see me within the organization? I said, well, people want to know what you're passionate about. People want to know where your beliefs are, because the more that they know those things, they not just understand who you are, but what your organization actually believes, and how you then can be an example of the personified consistency of how your services, in this particular case it was services, are delivered to your customers. And so I said to her, you're not doing anybody a favor by keeping these beautiful things in the dark. Only by putting light on them do people begin to understand not just what you believe, but the power that it holds, and talking about them in a way that's not about you, but what's in it for them. And what I mean by that is what's in it for the customer and the benefit of those beliefs.
Yes.
Or what's in it for the employee. And so the minute you begin to turn the attention away from this is not about me to this is all about how I serve, and that desire goes away. Even I've experienced, even in those people who are very humble, because the humble people, I found that these are the people that want to serve.
Thank you for that. I want to jump a little bit into the idea of continuous learning, because I think it's so central to effective leadership. And I was wondering if you might share with us something that you have learned recently, and share with us how you learned it, because I fear sometimes that people get so busy at work that they can get complacent about putting energy into learning that might not have an immediately tangible outcome, but that learning can build and build and build until we get to those outcomes, if you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of constant learning and constant challenge, and I mean challenge in sort of the healthy version of that, where you're pushing your own boundaries and pushing your own edges, and you're really understanding where those boundaries and edges are, so that you can go beyond them. So I do a wide variety of things, mostly outside of work, that infuses my learning. So one of the things I talked about earlier, and I've only been doing it for the last year and a half, is beekeeping. So it's a whole different world, and it's a skill set. I know it's not directly about business, but I promise I'll bring it back around.
It's all good by me. Thank you.
Yeah, good. So So I live on the edge of a canyon here in San Diego called Lopez Canyon, which is connected to Penasquitos Canyon, which is a very well-known preserve here. And we have, enough property that we can put beehives out back, which I have done. And for a wide variety of reasons, I got into beekeeping, partially because I was interested in helping the plight of the bees, and I know that there's pesticide issues and things like that. But I will tell you this, that what these bees have taught me about doing business or how to potentially run a business. Now, it took me some time to first understand what the heck beekeeping was all about, what it took, and how to even keep the bees and be really protectors of them, and then harvest the honey and things like that. But as you go about those things and learning about the world of the hive, as I was talking about before, you really understand that there's quite an ingenious ecosystem happening within the hive itself, and that they have their own set of systems and processes where it looks like chaos from the outside, but it is anything but chaos to the way that the hive actually operates. And because of all that, they can be so incredibly efficient in collection of pollen, the making of the wax, the making of the honey, and then the rejuvenation of the hive itself. So it's things like that I constantly do. My younger son and I just got into archery, for instance, and so archery happens at this range that we go to. And what I've learned out of that, it's all about presence and calmness and precision and even rhythm and ritual, so that every time when you go to shoot the arrow at the target, you're doing it with a very clear mind and with the intent to replicate as much quality as you can every time that you arrive to it. So it's things like this that I'm constantly doing, and I like doing these things outside my business because it feeds my business, and it feeds constant curiosity. I talk a lot about curiosity and deploying the beginner's mind whenever possible.
We will continue this interview with Stephen Morris right after this message.
Live It! Mastering positive attitude habits will help you work smart and live happy. Live It is a text and workbook in one, with note-taking and action planners designed into the book. The content is based on activities training participants rated with 5 stars for more than 15 years. What makes this book different from other attitude books is you have everything you need to move from thinking to doing, from waiting to changing, and from surviving to thriving. Even people who are generally positive appreciate these action assignments that help you shake off attitude blockers, reconnect with your life vision, and demonstrate the consistent behaviors to move closer to goals in every area of your life. Get the book on Amazon today and get to work in the 8 key areas of your life. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Go to Amazon now and purchase catherinegoggia's book, Live It! Mastering Positive Attitude Habits. Her 15 practical tips for managing your mindset have already inspired thousands of people, and they can help you work smart and live happy too.
As we apply specifically some of the learning from your stories there, beekeeping, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, well, what can our supervisors learn for that? One of the things that come to mind for me is no waste. If you think about lean manufacturing processes, it seems to me those bees have it down.
Oh my goodness, yeah. They have an amazing structure for no waste whatsoever. They're almost, it gets a little bit ruthless. Like, for instance, if a bee, and this is not a good lesson for the leadership team out there, but if a bee ceases to perform whatever its role is or whatever its task is, it will literally be destroyed by the hive. I mean, it's like, sorry, I got to tell a funny story about drones. So, and by drones, I mean the type of bees. So
yes,
drones are the only male that exists within the hive itself. Their only purpose is to help the queen breed and breed more bees, which is obviously a really important thing for the hive to continue to thrive, because the lifespan of bees is not very long, so they're constantly generating new bees. When that drone has lost its ability to help the queen reproduce, they chew its wings off and they push it out of the hive. They don't actually kill it, but it dies of a very horrible death. But when we think about the efficiency and the way that the hive operates, they have sort of a no-tolerance policy when it comes to either intruders or people who are not doing their job. And at the same time, there's a function within the hive, which is one of the most interesting roles within the hive itself, and from my perspective, is called the checker. And there's a bunch of different names for it in the apiarist world, but it's the bee that greets all the incoming bees from collecting pollen from the outside world, and it does a wide variety of things, such as read where that pollen has come from, welcome the bee back into the colony, but also check to make sure it's not bringing any diseases and things like that back into the hive. And so, because that role exists, any bee can come in there and be pretty much well set that bee is not going to be of any harm to the hive itself.
Right.
So I don't know if there's a management philosophy in that. I haven't, it's interesting. I haven't seen that role in corporate America, but I think there's an opportunity for that role in organizational life.
I do too, and I'm thinking a lot of things as I listen to your story there. I promise you, by the way, that there are some people listening today that are thinking, I wish we could push the people who aren't performing out of the hive. I promise you, people are thinking that. So we might not wish them death, but, I think that when people are no longer a good fit for the situation that we're in, we aren't doing that employee any favors by keeping them on board, telling ourselves a story. We're just trying to be nice. In fact, I look at it as being ultimately respectful of that person to identify why the situation might not be a fit for them anymore and help them go be free and find a good fit for them. Because I think the goal, at least from my point of view as a coach, is I want everybody to thrive just like you. And if they can't thrive here, how can we support a transition so they can thrive, in a new hive, for example?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring this up. I'll tell you, and this may be very helpful to the folks who are on the managerial level out there. I have a three-prong process for. It's kind of a three-door lens that I look at team and individual effectiveness. And so when I'm, to your point about whether or not, determining whether or not someone is a good fit for a team, I tend to deploy this three-pronged process, but it also helps to understand how to best set the team up or an individual up for the ultimate success. And so the three-pronged process is looking at the role or the team, the individual or the team, through the lens of appetite, capacity, and skill set.
Yes.
So just real briefly, I'll talk just quickly about them.
Yeah, I love it.
Fairly self-explanatory, but appetite. So appetite is, does the team or the individual have the appetite or desire or passion to do the work that's in front of them? And that question could be asked as relates to their role. It could be asked as it relates to the bandwidth that they might have. Maybe they have a bunch of other assignments already on their plate. Do they have the appetite to actually take on a new project, things of that nature? So appetite is the first one. And then capacity is we're all working in this day-in-day world, and more is being expected of the folks who are on the front lines actually doing the work.
Yes.
And so it's not unusual for the leadership of a team saying, okay, great, we hit last year's goals. Now we're going to increase them by 15% or 10% or 5% or whatever the percentage is. And we're going to the budget stays the same, but we have to do more. So at some point we have to ask ourselves the question of capacity. Do we have the capacity, which would be the energetic capacity, the time capacity, et cetera, all the resources, do we have the capacity to take on this project, or does this individual have the capacity to do this work that's in front of them? And then the last is obviously skill set, which is fairly obvious one, which is, do we have the skills required to do an excellent job within this? And I found that by looking at other individuals or teams and looking through this three-pronged lens, we can determine not just whether or not the team is going to succeed, because if you check all the boxes in appetite, capacity, and skill set, the likelihood of the team succeeding, at least from my experience, goes through the roof.
Yes.
Or you use that three-pronged process as a measurement of, well, the appetite is there and the skill set is there, but we don't have the capacity, and then we have to figure out a solution around those things. And so we use it as a troubleshooting methodology to figure out how do we be more effective as a team, or how does this individual either fit or not fit within the job role or function.
I'm interested in your language around that. I take a similar approach also, performance coaching for individual employees. And one of the things that I've seen repeatedly is supervisors who perhaps haven't been leaders for very long or don't have a lot of depth of experience, jumping to the conclusion that somebody doesn't have the skill set because they assume they've had a certain training. And so many times, Stephen, I have found out that people have not in fact received the training that it's assumed that they had. So I like taking these three prongs that you have, and in my world, that passion, that drive, speaks to attitude. I'm right there with you in capacity, and as you say, skill set can sound a little bit straightforward, but as we do a deeper dive into it, I find that it's not always as straightforward as it would seem.
Yeah, that's a great point. We walk around with this thing called the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge is that we assume that other people have the same knowledge in our head that we have.
Right.
For instance, and this falls in the leadership world quite often. So leaders tend to be the people who rise in the ranks and they know how to do a lot of different things. And so let's say we're talking about an individual on a team that has a particular function that leader is exceptional at. More times than not all the time, but more times than not, that leader will assume, because someone has gone through a 2-day training class or whatever the skill set is, that the knowledge and the skill set is there.
Yep.
And to your point, which I completely agree with, that does not always guarantee that is the case. And then, and so then the leader has to think about, how do I measure the skill set of this individual, or how do I help them by bolstering additional training in that particular area, which might actually include mentorship, by the way,
yes,
to help them become the manager or the worker, or do their job with more effectiveness in the skill set category.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. And I find that sometimes I have to do quite a sales job to get people on board with the idea of taking time for mentoring, but that's probably a different conversation there. Well, it's really fun to hear about some of the activities that you do in your personal time. I'm such a firm believer that effective leaders need to have a great balance between a healthy professional life and a healthy personal life. And I'm wondering, Stephen, if you would be comfortable sharing both a personal goal that you have upcoming this year and then also a professional goal.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the professional goal first because it might be a little easier.
Sure.
I have a new book in the works, and it's called The Evolved Brand, which obviously speaks to everything that I've been doing for the last 20-something years, and that book is nearly done, and my big business goal this year is to get that book out there. Personal goals, I want as much integration of my wholeheartedness and all of my work in my personal life. And so, goals that I would have around that. So I do a wide variety of things on the personal side of things. So I'm a fine art painter, and so I have a goal around that, which is to obtain more galleries that I show into. In the beekeeping world, I have another. I'm going to add 2 more hives to my collection of 2 hives that I already have. So I'm doubling my hive count this year. And then I'm going to build an archery range in our back area, so my sons and I can do our target archery out here. And those are kind of 3 big goals that I have personally.
It sounds all really fun, and I especially enjoy how some of your personal goals keep your family engaged as a unit together, which is so great, right? Well, tell us a little bit about how people can contact you. And when that book comes out, we want to make sure that our audience knows where to purchase it. It sounds great, Stephen. How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so my main website for the consultancy is themthdegree.com, and I'll spell that out, Mth Degree, DEGREE.com. And there, there's all kinds of free information for anyone who wants to read more about what I'm doing and what I'm up to. If you go to the Insights tab within the website, there's probably 200 free articles up there that people can download and read at their leisure. And I also have a free guide that I give out to people. If you just go to the homepage, there'll be a little button that you can sign up for this free, it's called Evolving to Thrive, 56-page guide, where people can download and deploy some of the things that I've been talking about, such as brand and business evolution, on their own throughout their own business, and take a lot of the practices and principles that I've been working on for years and work it into your own life.
Well, Relatable Leader audience, I encourage you to go to that website whenever one of our leaders offers us free resources. Why not? One of the great things about the ebook there too to think about is to start focusing in on what's best about your business and then instill that into the whole culture. Of course, you know me, I want to bring that down to you. What's best about you, and how can we have that consistently show up more often? So definitely check out his website, and I'm going to include his website in our show notes for today. Hey, Stephen, is there anything else you would like to share with our audience today?
No, that's it. Just a massive amount of gratitude to both you for holding this wonderful space here and for the service that you provide for the world, and to your listeners for spending their very valuable time listening to our conversation. Thank you.
Yes, well, Stephen, I want to quote your closing statement on your speech. You say, "There's no limit to the amount of beauty we can put into the world." I'm right there with you, and I just am so glad that we got to spend this time together to team up to spread some of that beauty.
Thank you. It's all my pleasure. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for joining me here at the Relatable Leader podcast. It is my mission to support your success through tools and knowledge you can apply immediately. I look forward to connecting with you in the next episode. Until then, take good care of yourselves and lead by example.